Thank you everyone for joining our session today, and I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar on performance management. So today we have Nick Holley. He's been doing quite a few webinars for Zoho People lately. For people who do not know about Nick, here's a little introduction. Nick has been an HR professional for more than 40 years now, and he's also worked with global businesses like Arthur Andersen, and he's been the director of global people development at Vodafone. He's also been a facilitator for HR leadership teams in companies like HSBC and Qatar National Bank. Currently, he is the director of learning at the Corporate Research Forum. Nick, we're really glad to have you here today, and thank you for doing this webinar for us. And before we move on, I'd like to just give you a gist of what we have in store for today. So Nick will start off the session by talking to you about performance management and how you can change your approach towards it. And followed by that, we will have a short 10-minute session on how Zoho People can help you with your performance management strategies. And finally, we'll have a live Q&A session with Nick. So please note that this session is being recorded, and the recording will be shared with all the participants here as well. And also note that you are in the listen only mode. So if you have any questions, please do not wait until the end. You can drop your questions in the questions tab on your left panel at any time during the webinar. So thank you, and over to you, Nick. Just give me a second as I transfer controls.
Okie doke. Thanks very much indeed, Princey. And I couldn't reinforce enough. I intend to be quite controversial. So I don't necessarily expect you to agree with everything that I say. So I would welcome challenge and questions. So let me accept control. So I think I have control. So what I'm going to talk about is how do we get performance management right? Now, I've researched this extensively. I've been the victim. I've experienced performance management as an employee. I was responsible for developing a whole approach to performance management in Vodafone many years ago. And I'll talk a little bit about that experience as well. But it was the research that I was interested in, because particularly there are so many companies which have done very, very different things in performance management, getting rid of ratings, etc., etc. And I guess if I'm honest, what I was looking for in the research was the silver bullet. What's the answer? How do we get performance management right? But to be honest, what I found was there is no right answer. The main thing that I found through doing all of this research was talking to all these companies is none of them said you should do what we're doing. Because what I found was it's not what they did, it's how they decided to do what they did was where the real learning point came from. Because it's funny, I've been running 2 sessions today, one with a group of leaders from a German pharma company, and then another session for some senior HR people in a global Swiss bank. And one of the themes that came out is context is everything. There actually is no right answer to how to do performance management. But with all these companies that I talked to, what I found was some fascinating examples of best practice. Little company called First Quantum Minerals, Unity Media in Germany. Inevitably on the west coast of America, there were some fascinating examples. People like Adobe, Juniper Networks, Gap were doing really interesting things, but all of them were doing very, very different things. But what I found really interesting was as I talked to them all, what I found is they all had a common approach to how they'd arrived at their solution, which is what I want to talk about. Equally, what came out was there was a standard approach. 95% of companies set their goals at the beginning of the year, and 94% assess delivery at the end of the year. Kind of intrigues me, the 1% that don't. 89% rated performance, and more than half of them had a 5-point rating scale. 33%, now this is where to me it really started to go wrong. 33%, a third, forced people into a normal distribution, and then 89% used that to decide on compensation for people. So let me start off with a poll, which hopefully I can get the technology to work. I'd like to ask you a question. So how happy are you with the approach to performance management in your business? And by the way, please approach it as somebody whose performance is managed, not as somebody who designs your performance management. Okay, I think I've got about 39 people. I've got 24 so far. So a few more people. $27 ratings. $29. Last few people. It's edging up a little bit. Oh, it's still edging up a little bit. Oh, another person came in as 10 stars. Maybe I should hand over the session to the 3 people who rated as 10 stars to tell us why it's 10 stars. But I don't see any more coming in. So let me just show you the result. So 5.6. Is 5.6 good? I don't really think 5.6 is actually a very good rating, especially when you've got 4 people rating it as a 1 star. So thanks very much. I just wanted to get some sort of involvement from you. Let me check. I've got chat open again, and let me move on to my next. The interesting thing is, as well as talking to all of those organizations, I also read all of the, a lot of desk research. And what I found fascinating, 4 different reports, 3% of organizations thought that performance management was delivering exceptional value. 6% thought it was worth the time, which means 94% didn't actually think the time spent on performance management was worth it. 88% rated the effectiveness of their performance management at B or below. I think the last one is the most disturbing result of all. Only 12% think it actually influenced business results. And this is my real passion in HR. Our job in HR is not to do HR. Our job is to make a difference to the business. We need to be connected to the business. Any of you who read any of my posts on Zoho Connect will pick up, I'm a business person. I work in HR. I've actually worked in HR for 30 years. 10 years I was an investment banker. But for those 30 years, I've never seen myself as an HR business partner. I've seen myself as part of the business, not a partner of it. So I think, you scored at 5.5, but if you look at the research, most people are deeply unhappy with performance management. So I just want to show you a quick little video that to me summarizes my view of performance management. Now, does anybody recognize what that is? So in chat, a question for you. What is that? I don't know if you can see it because the light's not very good.
Nick, the video is not playing.
The video's not playing. Oh, it's playing to me. Can you see it now?
No, Nick. Can you share the screen and play it on YouTube if you have, or?
I don't. So I don't understand. In fact, it doesn't matter if you can't see the video. So let me cancel that. It appears to be Harry Potter getting choked out. Absolutely. So where have my slides gone now? Hang on. Let me.
Nick, can you go to share material? Yeah, there.
Yeah, there we go. And let me. So do you know what the creature was that was choking Harry Potter? Anybody remember what they were called? They were called Dementors. So a Dementor sucks the life out of its victims. And in fact, I wrote a series of articles after I did the research where I christened performance management the giant soul-sucking parasitic monster of HR. Because in most of the research, people who experience performance management, it just was destroying motivation. But to me, the key message from all of this is if it's 5.5 out of 10, is that good enough? We shouldn't be satisfied with that. But don't think that there is a right answer to it. But we've got to have the courage to do something different. Because the problem is, if 95% of organizations are all doing performance management the same way, you've got to have a lot of courage to do it differently. And in my interviews, this was a lot of the conversations were, it's taken a lot of courage for us to do something. I was jumping out of the plane, but I didn't know if my parachute was going to open. So I think we've got to be brave. But I think we don't have to take an enormous risk if we follow the process that these good organizations went through. So I am not going to tell you the right answer because it depends on your organization. But what I'm hoping to do today is to challenge you to think about this current way of doing it is not the right way of doing it. There's no right way of doing it, but we can follow this. So the first thing that came out was all these organizations were passionate about the theory, not so much the theory behind performance management, but the theory around motivation, because part of performance management, and by the way, actually, that makes me think of one other thing to say. I wouldn't, and sorry, Princey, I wouldn't call it performance management. I'd call it something different. In Vodafone, we called it the performance dialogue, which I'll come back to. But all these organizations, they read 3 particular things. Now, I don't know if any of you have read or researched the work of Daniel Pink, David Rock, or Carol Dweck. But all these organizations had read them. So Daniel Pink, in his book Drive, talks a lot about what motivates people. And in particular, he found that actually money isn't a great motivator. It can motivate people who have what he called algorithmic tasks. An algorithmic task is where you repeat the same task again and again and again. But people who have heuristic tasks, that is tasks where there's variety, where you have to be creative and innovative. Actually, money does not motivate them. So if you are trying to motivate high performance, after all, no matter what you call it, it is about performance, which is, by the way, I would never call it performance appraisal. Because if you use the word appraisal, immediately you're threatening people. So what Daniel Pink says is don't link it to pay. Now, David Rock, who's a leading figure in neuroscience, what he's found is with SCARF, we can threaten people. So, for instance, status is the S. If we take status away from people, it's a threat. They don't like it. People like certainty. If you take away uncertainty, it threatens them. People need autonomy, which is also, by the way, a common theme from Daniel Pink. If you take away their autonomy, if you tell them what to do, they don't like it. Relatedness. If you as a manager don't relate to your people as individuals, they don't like it. And fairness. If you don't treat them fairly, so all these organizations were looking at, how do we not attack people's status? How do we help give them certainty? In particular, how do we treat them fairly? The final book, which, by the way, I couldn't recommend enough, is by Carol Dweck, talks about mindsets. And in particular, she talks about two different mindsets. One mindset is the growth mindset, and the other mindset is the fixed mindset. This is not about intelligence or talent. In fact, what was most interesting was a lot of very talented people have a fixed mindset. They think that God has given them this God-given talent, and therefore they don't need to try. Whereas what Carol showed was it's people who have a growth mindset, who think that the brain is a muscle like any other muscle. The more you exercise it, the cleverer you get. And you look at some of the great sports people. If you look at Roger Federer, if you look at, my mind's gone blank, who was the Chicago Bull? Michael Jordan. What differentiates them wasn't their talent. Michael Jordan wasn't that good a college or school basketball player, but he practiced. And therefore, what these organizations focus on is how can we use performance management to encourage a growth mindset, to help people think about how we can grow. So what this actually meant, whoops, if I go back, can I go back? Sorry. So what the theory said was it challenged them to think about a number of things. So all of them recognized that it's not the process of performance management that matters. It's the conversation. And I'll keep coming back to this. That's why in Vodafone, when we developed the approach, we called it the performance dialogue. It wasn't about the rating. It wasn't about following a process. Above everything, it was about encouraging managers to have really good conversations with their people that were forward-looking. Too much performance management is appraising, rating what you did last year. And to me, I don't get the point about having endless conversations about what you did last year. What I'm interested in when I was managing performance was looking forward, helping you think through how can you be better? A positive approach to performance management, not beating people up for what they did badly, but focusing on celebrating what they did well, but also helping them become better in the future. When I was at Vodafone, I had a really challenging set of conversations in Tokyo because I was convinced that it was about individual performance. Whereas it's fascinating. I don't know if any of you have ever worked in Japan or worked in a Japanese company, because the focus there is on the team, not on the individual. So what these organizations focus on is actually setting collective goals, giving collective feedback, encouraging collaboration, not just focusing on the individual. And not rating past performance, but helping you think through how you can improve performance in the future. So the focus is on the future, not on the past. And the final point, which comes back to Carol Dweck's work and this thing about fairness, is The danger is if you focus performance management on people's weaknesses rather than on building their strengths, I think we're missing the point. Because to me, the key challenge is not to rate your highest performers and treat them well. To me, the challenge is how do we help every single person in our business be the best they can be? How can we build on people's strengths? Which sometimes, by the way, means building cognitive diversity, teams with different people with different strengths, not beating people up because you're not good at this, but helping them build on the things they're really, really good at. So just a quick check-in in chat. Since I couldn't show you the video, I've not seen any interaction on chat. Any comments, any questions, any challenges? It's very difficult running sessions when you can't see people because you've got no idea if anybody's actually still listening. So help me out here. Great. Thank you. Oh, I see. I like people who say that's a load of rubbish, Nick. Brilliant. Thanks very much, everybody. I just need that positive reinforcement. So the second point, and hang on, I'm gonna wait now. Yeah, April. It's about authentic conversation. And what I love, particularly about what you say there, is it's the actions that follow on. And this is why I don't like it always looking back historically. So what? Surely we should be looking about action. And by the way, if we are investing time and money in performance management, it should result in something different. You know, there was one organization I talked to, I won't say which one. They had a system that required you to enter 135 different pieces of data on each of their direct reports. And I said, do you realize how much time that's taking? And they said, yes, but Nick, we have 200 tools in the system that allows us to analyze the data. So I said, okay, so how many tools have you used? And particularly, as a result of the analysis, what have you done that has increased revenue or decreased cost? Now, does anybody out there, I see a few people from Texas, etc. I don't know if you can speak Spanish, but can anybody tell me what their reply meant? Because when I asked them the question, they said nada. So somebody help the rest out. What does nada mean in Spanish? Nothing. They've done nothing. And that's the point to me. It builds on what April said. Does it make the boat go faster? Does it improve performance? Otherwise, why are you doing it? So the next point, as well as calling performance management the giant soul-sucking parasitic monster of HR, it's one of my greatest moments, that was. I've also called it the Swiss Army knife of HR. Because the second thing all these organizations did was they heavily researched their own practice. They didn't just look at at what was happening, but they ran focus groups to talk to people, real people, to understand what impact it was having in practice. So what they found was over complexity. That's why I call it the Swiss Army knife. They were just trying to do too many things. The core of performance management, which is setting goals that are aligned to the strategy, giving people continuous. Oh, it's just because there's a this knife is an iconic knife called the Swiss Army knife that has lots and lots and lots of different things on it. And the interesting thing is, I used to ask people if they had a Swiss Army knife, and they'd all say yes. And then I'd say, so how many tools do you have on your Swiss Army knife? 20, 18, 60, whatever. And then I'd say, so how many of those tools did you use? Well, I've used the knife, and that was the problem, is all these tools, but most people weren't using the majority of them. The one I love is the one at the bottom there, that you can use to extract stones from your horse's hoof. I don't know if anybody else has a horse, but most people don't. So does that make sense, Moen? It's, the Swiss Army knife has all these tools, but we don't use them. And what we've done in HR is add more and more tools to performance management. So we've added ratings, we've added potential ratings, we've added training needs analysis, we've added compensation, we've added bonuses, we've added all these things. And as a result, it's too complex and people don't know how to use it. In many organizations, there was a gap between the fantasy of what they thought was happening and what was actually happening. There was too much of a focus on process. And let me ask you a question, real question for all of you. Can you tell me, I don't need the number, I just need a yes or no. Can you tell me how many of your people have entered goals in your performance management system this year? Yes? One, that's a bit worrying. Yes. Okay. So I'm seeing quite a few people can say yes, yes. Oh, hi, Ignacio. Good to see you there. Small company. Okay. But generally you're saying yes. Second question. For those of you who said yes, can you tell me what percentage of those goals are the right goals? Interesting. Most organizations, Ignacio, it's the right question. How do you know which are the right goals? Most organizations don't go back and check whether the goals are the right goals. They just check. So, but is people feeling comfortable a good measure of success? Their professional goals, great. In fact, let me ask you another question. How many of you use SMART in setting goals? How many of you use SMART in setting goals? We do. Okay. So what does SMART stand for? So first of all, what does the S stand for? Specific. Yep. What does the M stand for? Measurable. I think you know where I'm going now. What does the A stand for? Attainable. And what does the T stand for? Time bound. Two of you, and this is really unusual, have got the right answer. Because if it's achievable, attainable, or whatever, a lot of people say the R stands for realistic. How many of you actually use realistic for the R? Most organizations talk about realistic. It's relevant. How is the goal relevant? Well done, everybody. Most people don't do it. How are the goals relevant to the strategy of the organization? And this to me is, if you're not checking that, how do you know if they are relevant? The fourth point is, it's so demotivating, particularly where you have a forced distribution. Because how many of you are average? Let me ask you, how many of you are average performers and how many of you are high performers? And Sandra and Moen, exactly. So Ignacio's a high performer, Sandra, high, 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 high. So you're all high performers. Well, the problem with a normal distribution is, by definition, the majority of you on this call are average performers. So Ignacio, Sandra, etc., Dominique, at least 4 of you are average performers. So how do you feel about me telling you you're average? How motivating do you find that? Exactly. So what do? We take 66% or whatever percentage in the middle and we call them average. That demotivates people. By the way, one organization I interviewed, they had a brilliant idea. He said, Nick, but we don't use the word average. We call our average performers A performers. And then we have A+ performers and A++ performers. And it's like, what do you think people think the A stands for? It stands for average. It doesn't matter what you call it. And that's demotivating. It's short-termist. Particularly if you look at the bias of people who are actually assessing. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of recency bias. Most people don't appraise over the year. They appraise them for the last couple of weeks. So it's very short-termist. And most organizations talk about strategy not for the next 12 months, but 3 to 5 years. And then what it does is it creates internal competition. Particularly, I spoke to Microsoft around about 2014. They got rid of stack ranking because when they'd done this internal practice, what they found, and they shared some stunning quotes with me, that people working in a team would, quote, would do enough to help the team, but never do enough that it would help some people in the team be better than anybody else. Because if they did, they'd get the top rating and they'd get the bonus. By the way, April, I must tell you one little story. My children are 27 and 29. I remember going to a parents' evening once, and one of the teachers who was teaching chemistry, she said, well, I think your child might be choosing, which subjects to study. She shouldn't study chemistry. I said, oh, why? Well, we had an exam on acids last week and she didn't do very well. And I said, oh no, you mean she failed the acid test? And the teacher just said, yeah, she did. She shouldn't study chemistry. Wonderful. Great teacher, no sense of humor. Anyway, the point was that it produces, if you rank people, why would I help people in my team get a better ranking, particularly if I link it to pay? Shane, absolutely. So I'm going to set the goals today, and then I'll give you your assessment in 12 months' time. Well, if you'd set goals in January 2020, how relevant were they in March 2020? It's got to be ongoing, which again means you've got to actually work with your managers to get them comfortable with having dialogues, having conversations. I'm going to talk in a second, by the way, but I'll share it now because it's just prompted me. At Vodafone, one of the things my boss, the group HR director, he wanted it to be an annual process where everybody starts at the beginning of the year and everybody finishes at the end of the year. So I said, but in finance, that won't work. And he said, why? Well, the end of the year, is called year end in finance. For several weeks, they have pizzas in because they're going through the accounts, getting them ready for the annual report. Oh, no, I don't care. They have to do it at the end of the year. And I just said, this is ridiculous. They won't do it. They're too busy. The last thing is management bias, because what really worries me is you now have people rated on a numeric scale. As soon as you start telling somebody they're rated a 3, it's a number, it becomes an objective fact. But managers are incredibly biased. There's recency bias. There's the bias of I'll give good reports to people who look like me. I could go through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different biases. So, we have got to challenge the fact that any rating is subjective, not objective. So the third element that they did, was they really connected to the business. If I'm honest, my big regret of what I did at Vodafone, and I'm quite proud of it, one of the things I did at Vodafone was I involved, and I'll come back and talk about that later. I involved people from every single operating company across Vodafone. We used a design thinking tool called a deep dive. We came together for 3 days. We'd done a lot of this research, and then we co-created something. My big regret is I only involved HR people in the process. What all of these people did was they connected to the business. And in particular, they really focused on what's the business trying to achieve. And this little study was part of my research, talking to CEOs. It's really interesting. They didn't see reward as the critical element. And if you look at reward, motivation, talent management, growth and development, those are all HR things. What CEOs all said was, we see performance management as the way that we can communicate our strategy and align people behind it and drive organizational performance. We've got to disconnect performance management from being an HR tool. It's a business tool. And if you don't think of it as something that drives HR processes like reward, like talent management, etc., we should be driving into the business domain, which is strategy alignment, culture, and performance. And if you frame performance management as a strategic business process, you're going to immediately question why we are linking it to so many HR processes. The fourth thing that they did was focus. Rigorous focus on trying to do a few things really well. Now, not all of them focused on the same thing, but across these organizations, there were 3 key areas of focus. Focus on the conversation, not on the process. Focus on development, on forward looking, help people be better. And Sandra, how can you do that if you do that once a year? Doing it weekly is brilliant, because that's the speed we're moving at. The other thing they focused on was KISS. All of them came into this process with this monster. All of them used the concept. I don't know how many of you have ever come across a medieval philosopher. I popped his name into the chat. I bet none of you are expecting to study a medieval philosopher this evening, but Sir Thomas Occam, his concept was what he called, thank you, Kieran, thank you. It's good to work with people who know this stuff. So he created the concept of Occam's razor. Occam's razor is, you have a hypothesis, a concept, an issue, a problem, and you get your razor and you slice away all the peripheral stuff that doesn't matter and come down to what is the essence. So what a lot of these companies did is they got out Occam's razor and they sliced away all the stuff that had connected itself. It's almost like performance management becomes an HR magnet and everybody wants to be involved in it. No, they cut it back to focusing primarily on great conversations that are linked to the business, that are about deploying the strategy, that focus forward on how can we help people develop. The 5th point was involvement. And as I say, what I got wrong at Vodafone was not involving the business. Now, it's 15 years ago now. Hindsight's a great thing. Actually, what's really good about what we did was, because it wasn't designed at the center by Nick from head office. By the way, do you know what the biggest lie in business is? What's the biggest lie in business? I'll be patient, because maybe some people are typing it. Well, the business itself, thank you. Very deep and philosophical, Moan. The truth. Oh, I'm getting very, I was just telling a joke, but these are very deep. So my joke version, the biggest lie in business is, I'm from head office and I'm here to help. Thank you, James. Oh, sorry, I stole your thunder. Even better, I'm here from HR and I'm here to help. By the way, when you're a consultant and I'm an independent, I've learned the other biggest lie in business is the checks in the post. But my point here is we involve people from every operating company. And when I did this research, it was 15 years after we'd implemented this approach to performance management. And what I was really proud of is Vodafone is still using fundamentally the same approach. They still call it the performance dialogue. If I developed it on my own in group head office, the day I left, it would have died. But by involving people, it created engagement, ownership, and people wanted to continue with it. My big regret, as I say, all these companies involved business leaders in developing their approach. So they were committed to it. And one of their learning points was it's better to have an 80% solution with 100% buy-in than the perfect solution that nobody buys into. And you get that engagement through involvement. Don't do it to them, do it with them. The next thing was building in flexibility. I mentioned in Vodafone, it's no good doing the same process in every function when finance has a year end. It was no good imposing an individual-based approach to performance management in Japan when everything is done through the team. Thank you. Great point, Char. So you've got to build in an approach that is flexible through the year. The seventh thing was they were all rigorous about measurement. And they identified the measures at the beginning, not at the end. And in particular, they measured business outcomes, not process completion. So Microsoft, for instance, when they got rid of stack ranking, it was because Satya Nadella, the new CEO, had come in and wanted a culture of collaboration. Stack ranking created a culture of internal competition. So, through the employee opinion survey, they had a set of questions that gave them a collaboration scale. And that's how they measured the success of performance management, because they saw a dramatic increase in internal collaboration by moving away from stack ranking. By the way, I must tell you one other little funny story. I was talking to one of the Swiss banks, and they had a 5-part rating of performance. And senior leaders were very upset because nobody was putting anybody in the lowest of the 5 rankings. You know, I've seen that time and again. So do you know what their answer was? They got rid of the lowest ranking and went to a 4-point ranking scale. Isn't it great to see strategic thinking in HR? This is the last point, but it's the core point. All of them focused on dialogue and thinking how they could support it. They trained managers and employees in how to have a great dialogue. By the way, training was mandatory, because what they all found was the managers who turned up for the training, if it wasn't mandatory, were the ones who did it well anyway. So what was the point? It was mandatory. HR supported, which meant the business partners working in the business to coach and support managers day to day, minute to minute, in how to have great dialogues. And if managers didn't do it, there were consequences. It hit them in their pocket. In particular, what was really interesting is it hit them in terms of their career progression. And there was a huge amount of communication. But that communication wasn't just sending emails and doing PowerPoint presentations. It was the HR people out there listening, talking, coaching, having dialogues themselves with the business. Now, before I hand back to Princey, any questions, any challenges in chat? While you're putting that in, I just want to share one last thought. After I'd done the research, when I thought about these 8 stages, it actually made me think about what we need to do in HR. Because we need to be curious. We shouldn't just, do what everybody else is doing because it's safe. We need to do our research. We need to be curious. We need to collect data. We need to collect data on what's actually going on in our own organizations. We need to be business people connected to the business, not doing HR to them, not being the control function. We need to focus. What are we really trying to achieve here? Let's focus on the vital few, not create this monstrous Swiss Army knife. Let's be pragmatic, not theoretical. Let's have the self-confidence to challenge the business and involve the business. You know, because the danger is if we involve the business, they might say things we don't want to hear. Well, that's fine. Let's have the confidence. Let's make sure we measure outcomes, not inputs. And proximity. If it's all about dialogue, we need to be close to the business. We need to be sitting in the business. We need to be spending time in the business. Now, I know in our virtual world that's difficult, but hopefully we might be coming out of that. But in this world, it just means using, tools like Zoho Showtime, Zoho Connect, etc., to really connect with people. So that's all I've got to say. I'm happy to hang around and answer any questions, but I'm going to hand over to Princey now. I presume you'll take back control and talk a bit about what Zoho can do to help you in performance management. And I'll go on mute.
Thank you, Nick. It was a wonderful session, thought-provoking and very insightful. I'm sure other participants would also agree to this. So just a second. All right. So moving on to Zoho. So Zoho People and Zoho People Plus are the two offerings from Zoho to help you with your people operations. So Zoho People is a cloud-based human resource management system which will help you to manage your employee time off, attendance, performance, learning, and all your core HR processes. And Zoho People Plus is a bundle of 6 different Zoho applications coming together. We have Zoho Recruit for recruitment, Zoho People for your core HR management, and Zoho Connect and Click for your internal communication and collaboration. And we also have Zoho Expense for your expense management processes. So these are the two offerings from Zoho, and now we'll move on to the performance management aspect of Zoho People. So as we were discussing all along, performance management is not the same as it was a decade ago, and today, especially now when organizations are thinking of planning to move to long-term remote work strategies, it is not just important for you to change your approach towards performance management, but it also lies in how well you use technology to your advantage, and also how efficient you are with your with delivering performance management. So the first and the foremost thing of performance management is that it should help employees understand their role in the organization, understand what is the job they're working on, understand their goals and how their individual contribution affects the bigger picture. So though coming up with your goal strategies or how you set your performance management strategy lies with you, Zoho People helps you in delivering that. So for example, if you see here KRA and goals, help you deliver the goals or whatever you have planned for your employees, and it helps managers to guide the employees in the right direction. It helps them help them prioritize what employees should work on, and it also gives them a picture of what each employee is working on. And Every employee joining your company brings in a variety of skills to the table, and it is the company's efficiency in identifying these skills and using it in the right way. So in Zoho People, employees will be able to add their uh, skills, whatever they have, and as they learn, they'll be able to upgrade it as well. So the skill level goes up. So how does this come in handy? Well, if you are looking for specific people with specific skill sets for a particular project, it helps you filter them based on the proficiency and use the right people in your projects. And not just that, Zoho People also has a learning management system. So all the skills mentioned here will be available there too, and managers will be able to assign or enroll employees in courses and or suggest courses to them based on their skill sets and where they think they should improve. And as Nick was saying, feedback should be timely, right? You cannot wait till the end of the year to provide your feedback. Zoho People enables 360-degree feedback. So this way, managers can give feedback to their reportees, employees can share feedback with their peers and also their managers. And this can be restricted at any level based on your requirements. And as we were talking, Nick was telling about how you need to have an ongoing dialogue with between the manager and the employee. So, with continuous reviews, help you set the base for that. So, this is where the manager and the employee can come together, review their goals, review how they've done, and set goals for the next quarter or even for the next 1 month too. And every company has an appraisal process where you have your salary hikes and all and ratings and salary hikes. So this entire appraisal process is completely customizable in Zoho People. So right from creating different appraisals for different roles in your company to having self appraisals or the review period, everything is completely customizable. And as part of your appraisal process, we do have self reviews. So, this is the time where employees can take a step back, review their work, and see where they stand, and also analyze where they can improve. So, not just that, but when let's just say an employee is working under two or three projects in a given time frame. So it only makes sense when you collect feedback from all the three managers and probably even some other people in the team. So multi-rater feedback will help you do that and get a holistic picture of how an employee's performance, and also you get to see feedback from different perspectives. And as part of the appraisal process, we do have budgeting and salary hikes where you'll be able to manage this process seamlessly, and and all of this is also completely customizable based on your requirements. So that's pretty much about Zoho People, and you can visit us at zoho.com/people. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of today's session. And most of all, thank you for making it interactive. It was a wonderful webinar. We hope to see you in another webinar with Zoho People soon. Thank you.